if I can tell my story, with my background as in like military, like we don't say anything, and with my experience, if I can share my story and like here's my vulnerability, like I can get other people to open up too, and actually let's talk.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm pumped to have this conversation. I was doing a little bit of research into kind of your story, and it's amazing. I wanted to start out with really just so I know you've got the book Unbroken, right?
That's correct.
Take me through a little bit about that process of like the backstory behind what brought you to write that book, and specifically what I'm looking to get into is what was the motivating factor for you personally that was like, hey man, this story is so good, I gotta tell other people.
So just want to point out, I'm glad to be here. So on that aspect, it's pain is why I wrote my book. I was going through a point where I felt like in my life it was very just, I don't know, I felt like life was just like kicking me like on the ground constantly. And as a male, you typically will try to work things out and work out. And what I did was that I went outside, and outside it was a dark night. It was a little raining back here in California, and I was working out, and it was just something hit me, and I walked out, and I just like fell to my knees and just screamed like, "Tell me my purpose." And like I said, at that point, I felt like life was just like kicking me on the ground. But when I said that, I felt an urge that I've never felt, like a fire, where I got up and I just yelled, like, after everything I've been through and everything I've done, after everything I've lost and all the women that I love left, you can't beat me. From that moment, I came in, dried off. I got a bottle of whiskey and I started writing for 2 days straight, just bawling my eyes out. And if I can tell my story, with my background as in like military, like we don't say anything, and with my experience, if I can share my story and like here's my vulnerability, like I can get other people to open up too, and actually let's talk.
Yeah. Well, I love that you shared that. And the first thing it makes me think of is the natural inclination, I think, probably more so ingrained in men, but I'm sure present in everybody, that we all struggle with stuff. So just kind of shut up, walk it off, and deal with it. It's not really super common for people to really voice their pain and kind of tell that story. We internalize it a lot, uh, try and forget it happened, and then just carry on. So I love that you tell that story because I think it gives people permission to really feel that and share that, because I think it really helps embolden other people to see, hey, what's possible when you embrace that. Have you had that same sort of experience?
Of course, it's been really life changing on various levels, not just with myself, but just with family in general. I mentioned the context of how I wrote my book, and some people were like, "I never knew you were writing a book." I was like, "I didn't know I was writing a book until it just happened." Um, like I said, how short I did it, because for me, it was like 100 therapy sessions in like 2 days. Literally, just it was hard. Um, but previously, I was with a family member, and he said something to me. His name's Lou Marcato. He said, you're a risk. I see greatness in you. You're a risk taker. So when I was writing my book, I would think that, and just kept going. But with family, I've actually, with my aunts and uncles and people like of, typical Hispanic culture, as males, we don't share anything, right? It's just like, suck it up. Don't talk about your feelings. Just keep going. But when I actually mentioned the story of my aunt, I got them to open up too, as well as express trauma that they've been through, the pain they've actually
Mm,
experienced. And I think that's empowering if we show that. We need to. Everybody goes through pain. It's just you have to actually address it and face it head on and make it fuel your purpose.
yeah. It it reminds me a little bit of oysters, which may be a weird segue, but when oysters get that bit of sand inside of them, right, that causes them tremendous amounts of pain, what winds up happening is they create a pearl out of it, right? Through the process of trying to deal with that pain and remove the sand is how they create that pearl. And I think the cool part about your story and why it reminded me of that is that painful process that some oysters go through is what creates the pearl that gets left behind for other people to enjoy, right? And that pain that they endure for all that time is what creates that beauty that is left behind for the rest of us. And I think the cool part that your story is really reminding me of here is that I think all of us go through some level of pain, right? Some of it is going to be very different, right? Everyone's got a different story, but you can use that for purpose. You can use that for good and to inspire other people. And I love that you're sharing that and encouraging other people to do so, because I really think not only does it give them permission, like we said before, but it has this multiplying effect where it continues now to pass through other people, and it allows other people to feel free, to feel a little bit of empowerment from that. I would just love your thoughts on how do we keep that conversation going.
Well, I think with pain in general, like no one wants to talk about it. It's somewhat understandable, because you have to, you're hurt. I was watching Denzel, I was watching Equalizer 2 probably about a week ago. And Denzel said a good line that actually stuck with me. And he said, pain comes in two forms, either hurts or alters. That's your choice. And I think that we have to actually talk about things. A big thing where I see is from like war, either in Afghanistan or in a relationship, war happens when people don't talk. Think of a marriage, I can attest to that. Relationships and marriage, that if we don't talk and actually address these things, that burden, that pain is going to be there, and it's going to, it'll stay, and eventually it's going to come back up in future arguments. So if we can actually just be vulnerable with each other and be like, it's okay. Like, to me, vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength. And I think we should be able to just actually open up to each other, and don't worry about if people judge you. It's just, you're, as long as it helps you, I think we should do that.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like people don't consider that enough, right? Their personal relationship with the pain, and they try and avoid it. And almost always, if not always, it comes back stronger and worse than if they just kind of embrace it, right? Deal with it and use it to alter them for the good.
Exactly. I think, especially no one wants to face it, but if you face it, you could be like life changing and actually use it to like better yourself. A big thing for me, it's, I asked when I talk to like family members and people that are actually in pain, and I'll ask them something, and I was like, pain is a teacher. What is it teaching you? If you think of change your perspective, you can actually use it to actually empower yourself and get stronger, be better.
Mm.
But people just, they see it as a weakness, but it's really not.
Yeah, I love that. I think encouraging people to use it to find out what it's teaching them is a really good reflection point. So, like for you, do you often sit and either journal or go through the process of thinking like, hey, this is an experience that really sucked for whatever reason. How can I grow from it?
It was actually through my book. Honestly, I don't journal. I don't do anything like that. Sometimes I'll reflect, but actually when I was going through just my pain in general, I'm facing everything head on, from my deployments to relationships, like what I did wrong. We have to be accountable for our actions. Like, what people say that, I did everything right. Well, why did this happen then? Obviously something's wrong. It's not necessarily you. It could be a relationship situation. But a self-reflection is a big part of growth. And you have to take that hard look, like what did I do wrong? What did I do right? Um, and that's the hard part, is being accountable for like your own actions.
Yeah. Which I think a lot of people tend to avoid because it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to, sit in that conversation where you feel like, man, I screwed up. We try and avoid that as much as possible.
Exactly. I think, for like when I was writing my book, I was going through everything from my deployments to the psychological trauma to, my divorce and that story, to in my last relationship. What did I do right? I felt like I was doing everything right, but there's part of it I wasn't. And I had to actually look in the mirror and be like, okay, yeah, I could have done better on this aspect, but actually growing from that and knowing now, I'm just like, okay, it just empowers me to be a better person just for the world to see.
Yeah. How much of it is forgiveness?
A lot of it's forgiveness. You think about it, the hardest part is forgiving yourself for something that happened. But, like with childhood trauma, it's, a lot of it's not your fault when you actually look at it, especially like when my mom left when I was 3 and I thought it was my fault. But actually looking back, it's like, well, that's their actions, not doesn't reflect mine, and I think if we forgive ourselves and don't be so hard on ourselves, the world is cruel as it is, life's unfair. The last person you should be hard on is yourself if you're not trying to grow.
Yeah. Because I think that there's a certain amount of self-inflicted hardship you should have, right? I've said that probably pretty poorly, but my point there is like you should hold yourself to a high standard to a degree, but not be negative and hypercritical. Right? So how do you juggle that balance?
Well, I think, when it comes to that, I think we have to push our limits to where, okay, how far can I get, and then keep pushing, but also don't be upset if you fail. Cause like I said, it's failure is you're actually getting better and you're improving. I think it's a fine balance, but at the same time, if you're not improving, then you might want to, stop and look in the mirror and be like, okay, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Um, I think that's pretty crucial.
How important do you find it to have a tribe around you who's all like-minded?
It's very important. For me, like I said, it's really with the military, but my family's a big one. My sisters, my daughter, people that are there in your corner that will like be there to like help you when you're down. If you don't have those people, it's a little harder to get back up if you're just like down and no one's there to actually pick you up. Sometimes we all need it. It's not it's not a sign of weakness. We need that tribe around us to help support us and we help support them.
Yeah. What about faith for you? Like I know you said, when you're in that moment, you dropped your knees and kind of asked for your purpose. What was that experience like in regard to your faith?
So when it comes to faith, I believe there's a God, a higher power. I just don't know who it is. Some people say Jesus or Muhammad or, a lot of different religions. I know there's a higher power. I just don't know. I think this stems from my first deployment where I was losing brothers and I would question like this guy is literally doing everything right. He's, I'm just here, just, not the best, best, ideal fella, I guess you would say at the time, but like, how come he's gone and I'm not? So I had a big issue with, faith for a while, but I think writing this book and actually feeling that power, I think it brought me back to faith. And so, okay, well, there's actually a higher power there that's teaching me something.
Right. So that's sort of still a journey you're on right now, trying to really understand that your kind of personal walk.
That's correct.
I like that. You know what I like the most, to be honest with you, there is the actual honest answer of it. Because I feel like it's really easy. I mean, obviously, I don't know your intimate life details to fluff an answer here and just give something for the sake of looking good on a conversation. But to give an honest assessment of yourself and like, hey, right now, I'm not a 10. I'm like a solid 7, right? I've still got some room to grow and some things to figure out. I just want to honor you for that because that's fairly uncommon.
Yeah, definitely appreciate it. I think we have to be authentic to ourselves. And I think I've learned that where I'm just like, this is me, this is my journey, this is what I've been through. You can like it or like it or not. I get it. If you don't like me, that's fine. But I'm me. Um, the world we live in now, it's everybody tries to fake their own identity, fake their own authenticity for what? What do we gain from that? You might be popular for a little bit, but you're still not really yourself. People will find that out eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really that short term approval, and I think it's almost like we talked about before when you want to stay in that comfort zone when you can lie to yourself. But again, this is just conflict delayed is conflict multiplied. It eventually comes back around and always worse.
Exactly. I think that's the big thing is we have to be authentic to ourselves and, you know, not everybody has the best life. Like everybody has their own story to tell. I'm just telling mine and some people might agree, some people not, but if everybody shares their story and actually we talk, we can all learn from each other different genders, ethnicities, doesn't matter, generations. I think we all can learn a lesson. And
Yeah.
it's to me it's strange because a lot of things in my book. I was talking to my uncle probably last weekend, and he mentioned something in my book. I mentioned love. I found out the hard way, like love can't conquer all. Sometimes you got to have a balance. He mentioned that when he was telling his story. I was like, it's crazy. Like, if you guys would have like just taught us that, we could have avoided those lessons if we actually talk.
Mm. Yeah, it's uncommon for men typically to have these types of conversations, right? We want to be quote unquote masculine and macho, and oftentimes we put on this facade of, hey, I got to be strong, silent, aggressive, quote unquote masculine, and not have feelings, emotions, talk about the softer side. But then you look around and how many quote unquote men are out there suffering silently, lost, right? Everyone's got this same struggle going on, but we put on this facade and walk around and pretend like it doesn't exist. Deep down, all of us are struggling with the same thing. If we all just actually said, hey, I need some help, I got to talk about it. How do you feel about it? Imagine the progress we can make.
Exactly. I think that would help our mental health crisis we have alone. It's a lot of these suicides, and people are suffering, and because they're not talking. And it's not like be vulnerable. It's okay to need help. And I think that's a big thing, is if we can prevent people from actually committing those acts and actually talk ahead of time, we can get ahead of this. Um, you know, but the thing is, people have to be vulnerable, and a lot of people won't, which is okay. But at the same time, like it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. Do you think it's important to be the one that goes first there and kind of set the space for people to feel comfortable to be seen as their authentic self?
I would say so. For my experience, just for the last 2 months at least, um, the side where for my family, they've read my book, they've cried, they just had no idea, and a lot of people actually opened up, and they're like, you were the first person to actually open up. I feel like I can open up too. It's like I'll take that. Granted, I've got a lot of stuff from family or like that didn't really disagree, but that's fine. You're gonna get some bad stuff, you're gonna get some good stuff, and that's okay. But if you actually take that lead, be brave, take that step, take that risk, and take a chance on yourself, you can actually help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a good advice. And I think that there's way too many people who are walking around afraid to take that step, right? And they're afraid of judgment, of criticism. What would you say to that person?
I would say it's okay. You're going to get criticism as long as you're being yourself and taking that chance and making your life better. That's all that matters. You have to just take that risk, take a risk on yourself. We have to do that. And I would tell them, just take that risk. It's worth it. You'll feel better, and you'll be in a better place really soon.
Yeah. What was your inspiration for joining the military?
So I joined the military because I was a troubled kid. I got a lot of trouble, and I didn't focus too much on my grades. And I always felt like I had a higher purpose. Like, I want to do something better. My family didn't really have that much money to actually send me to college, so scholarship was really an option. The 9 to 5 job just didn't appeal to me. So that's where I was like, okay, well, I want to be part of something bigger than myself. So that's why I went in back in 2009. The heart of the war. I was like, I want to be in the fight. So that's the reason I joined, because I felt like I was bigger than what I was doing.
Did you find that there?
I did. I did. The camaraderie, the experience. My first deployment was definitely the best, worst year of my life. I learned a lot about myself, my limits, but it also came with a lot of pain. Lose friends, brothers. I lost a lot of brothers, and I came home and I had to bury my mom. So that definitely affected me big time, but I would never go back and change it. I would do the exact same thing
Hmm. Why?
because the growth I learned from that. I think with the military, it makes you push beyond your mental limits and physical limits to actually keep you in that uncomfortable state. So you're constantly learning about yourself. How much can you handle? You know, sometimes you think, okay, this all I can do. And then you push further, you take a step further. And for me, it just shows it helped build that resiliency. So I think that's why I think it's very beneficial to me, at least during that time.
Do you think that that level of self confidence and trust in yourself carries out now into just the regular everyday?
Yeah, I would think so. I think the big thing for that is just for me, I've always been soft spoken and very just quiet because I know my limits. So I'm aware of how much, how far I can go as in like resilient wise. So like really it helped me with my patience. Like it really nothing affected me. You know, they always the family always like, you're always so calm. I was like, because this is really like it's nothing. We're worrying over small stuff. There's no point.
Yeah. So you would say that that gave you maybe a little perspective into kind of does this day to day crap that we all argue over really matter?
Exactly. Especially, little things like road rage, right? People get worried about traffic. Like, well, we're still going to be in a car. We're still going to be in traffic. If we get upset over, the traffic, you're really not going to change anything. You're just going to be upset.
Yeah. So it's for you more of like an active choice of how to live your life in this controlled, peaceful way because you understand that escalating to that level has consequences.
Exactly. I think when you see like what the worst humans have to offer, as in like violence wise, and other people's condition, like being overseas, you come back to respect the beauty of just balance of the beauty we have here, which a lot of people now don't see it that way. But once you actually see that the true extent of violence, then you're just like, okay, this is really not so bad.
Yeah. I guess to kind of tie it all together, then that would give the pain a purpose to really help you kind of appreciate the good times because you understand what the pain really is.
Exactly. I think that's where I have a different perspective, and I try to help other people. Like, like what you're going through, like it sucks, but if you change your perspective and actually use that pain to fuel, make you better, you can actually improve your life. And just think about what's happening overseas and stuff like that. It's, that's their everyday life. That's what they do all the time, So the beauty we have here is, I see the calm and the peace, and I see that as beauty.
Mm. There's a quote that I love that says, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war. And I'm curious on your take on that.
Oh, so I definitely, I like that quote. First time hearing it, so I love it off the bat. Because the reality is, it's having that inside you that like you can do, like you can send me to war tomorrow, and I'll be like, okay, let's go. But at the same time, you have to hold that. A lot of men try to have that alpha mentality where I'm the best person ever and stuff like that. But it's usually the silent people. That's the people you want to watch out for because they know what they can do and they just choose not to do it. And that alone just shows restraint that you know people should have and not actually just be like aggressive all the time. There's no point.
Yeah. When I hear that quote a lot, I think about the propensity of men to often stand up in the garden and yell, "Hey, I'm a warrior. I just happen to be standing in the garden," because they're afraid people are going to judge them for being in the garden. Right? It's this perspective of, "Hey, I'm not an alpha male because I'm standing in a garden and I need to be surrounded by,
Hmm.
X, Y, and Z to show you how masculine I am." Do you see that as a thing?
I definitely do. I think it's more just when you're authentic to yourself and know your capabilities and know what you're able to do if needed be, like protect family. That just comes down to me. It's just more of a confidence thing and just being authentic to yourself. Like, you don't need to prove anything to nobody. As long as you know what you're capable of, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. So you think maybe the main thing there is that person themselves doesn't even know who they are or what they're capable of themselves?
I would say so.
How do you start figuring that out? Is it really just pushing yourself into uncomfortable situations to kind of figure out what you're really made of?
I think it's more just being self-reflection. That's what I think it is. It's the balance of being uncomfortable, pushing your limits, but at the same time reflecting on just your story alone. What did you learn? What did you not? Being accountable for your actions. Like, yeah, I wasn't great. Let's say I wasn't a great dad or husband, but I can improve on that and learn from that. I think you have to just look in the mirror.
I'm glad you brought that up because I don't want the perspective to be you have to enroll in the military and go to war to find out what you're made of. But like you can do a little bit of an after action review on how you showed up as a spouse or how you showed up as a parent, and then use that to be like, man, I hate the feeling that I had to argue or yell at my kid before they went to bed. How can we avoid that tomorrow? Right. So is there that same sort of self reflection in just everyday life?
Definitely. As being a girl dad is a little tricky. So I'm learning. It's a little balance, but it's a lot of things you have to understand that you might not have all the answers, but as long as you look in the mirror, reflect on what you did today as, say a spouse, a father, brother, son. If you see like, what did I do right? Like, was it good? Okay. What did I do wrong? And actually look at that. Like, you don't need to be military to be a man, right? You don't need to do all that stuff to prove yourself. But if you actually hold yourself accountable and look in the mirror and actually genuinely criticize yourself on your good and your right, and I think that we can all improve.
Yeah. I love that, we kind of talk about, hey, what did I do wrong? Because when you hear that question, there's this like innate feeling of I'm going to get in trouble for whatever my answer is. But ultimately, figuring out what you didn't do right or what you did wrong or however you want to phrase it is the only way that you can improve. So it's like encouragement to have that honest conversation with yourself. It doesn't matter what the answer is, right? It's like, when you have this really bad pain in your tooth, but you refuse to go to the dentist because you think if the dentist doesn't tell you you need a root canal, it just won't exist, right? So it's being afraid of hearing the answer somehow prevents it from being real. I love the encouragement to just ask yourself that question every day. Hey, what way could I have shown up better today?
Exactly. I think just it's the truth, the honest truth people don't want to hear. A lot of people want to hear, tell me what I want to hear. Don't tell me, the honest truth. But the honest truth is the best truth, in my opinion, because you get the raw honesty. And like I say, we're all human. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. As long as you learn from those mistakes to better your own self, to be, show up as the father, spouse, and be a better husband, stuff like that, we can always learn on that. We don't always have the right answers, which is, that's okay, but don't continue doing the same thing and
Yeah.
expect different results, right?
Yeah, that's sanity. Uh, so for someone who feels broken right now, right? There's someone listening to this who feels like they're a failure, they messed up, they're not where they want to be. How do they transition from broken to unbroken?
Well, for that, I would answer a simple question. It's choice. Either unbroken or broken. The choice is yours. You have to just see in your life, like, what are you doing wrong? You might not do anything wrong, but it's not going the way you plan, which life doesn't go with plan. But you have that choice to change that. It's up to you. No one can fix it for yourself. It's really up to you to decide how you want to live your life from now to the future. You have to dig deep and self reflect on what you've done right and what you've done wrong, and see what, the pain that they gave you, like, what did it teach me? It has to teach you something. If not, you're not really looking that hard.
Yeah. So, Mir, when you say there is you have to take an active role in writing your own story.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's definitely way too many people who just give up that level of control, let somebody else write the story, and they just kind of try and fit inside the pages.
Yeah, so I think I've done that. I was just the typical, military, get married, have kids, get a house, stuff like that. But I was fitting somebody else's mold. I was trying to do what I thought a husband should do and fit, my ex-wife's mold of, you have to dress this way, you got to talk this way, you have to not be so, yourself, I guess you would say. That was her story, it wasn't mine. And when I actually changed that, that's where I was starting to write my own story. We all have a story, you just have to tell it
Hmm.
and have that talk.
And what about your story versus her story? And then is there our story together? Because I think that's a very different distinction.
Yeah, so I think her story is a little different than mine. I try to look when I was writing my book, I try to look at both perspectives, like why she did what she did. I was at home. I was gone a lot. People getting lonely, I understand. Um, I don't know why she did it. Her choice. That's her choice, not mine. But we did have our story, in our story, my little girl came from it, so I can't complain on that. But I think that I don't, for me, I don't blame her. Like I see now, it's like, oh, that self reflection. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't like the choice, but I somewhat understand why.
Yeah. I think that's a really healthy thing, which is uncomfortable because it admits at some point in the past you were not as good of a version as you are now or as authentic of yourself, right? You weren't showing up in the right way. And that could be really uncomfortable to admit, even just to yourself, let alone, you know, to a guy you just met half an hour
It,
ago.
exactly. So I think that's if you just share your story, like we all can learn from something. I wasn't, around a lot of military. I contracted, so I was gone for years. And in a marriage and relationship, if you're gone for so many times or for so long, eventually it's gonna break. In a relationship, you have to help each other and be each other's partner in crime. And at that point, I was so focused on the financial aspect of what a good dad or good husband should be that I was just worried about money. But in a marriage and relationship, it's not just money, it's emotional as well.
Right. And I think not accepting that fact might keep you out of discomfort in the short term, but it also prevents you from having that deep level of relationship in the long term. So, like, if you don't accept that about yourself and how you used to show up, you can't grow on it and you can't then have a new relationship in the future that's, totally different.
Exactly. I think that's where that self reflection, but also if you do the exact same thing, like I said, definition of insanity, it's going to repeat itself
Right.
and you're going to be in the same situation you were a couple years ago
Yeah.
and then wonder why.
Right. If you had one bit of advice to give to someone, right? So we talked a little bit about choice, but like one maybe exercise or one practice that they can implement today to kind of set them on the right path or at least take one step forward, what do you think that would be?
Write it down. Actually, write it down, journal, and actually, I wouldn't say get a bottle of whiskey or I'm going to condone that, but literally just open your heart out, write everything down from your life and look, look in the mirror and reflect on what you've done wrong. It's going to be painful. You're going to go through the pain again because you have to write it down. But once you do that, that pain no longer holds power on you. Now you
Hmm.
shift that pain to purpose to better yourself.
Do you have to show it to anybody or can you just like write it down and then throw that in the fireplace?
Oh, you could write it down, throw it away, burn it. Like as long as you write it down and get it out your system, that's all you need. You don't have to show anybody. A lot of people don't want to, which is okay. But actually, as long as you write it for yourself, that's all that matters.
Hmm. So I'm hearing you say it's important to just be honest with yourself, right?
Exactly.
I love that. I think that's great advice. Well, again, I want to honor you for this conversation. I know it brings up a lot of uncomfortable topics, and you seem like someone who's become comfortable being uncomfortable. So I want to celebrate that and really honor the work that you do. It's
Def,
very
de-
beneficial.
Definitely appreciate it. I'm just trying to help everybody just get through. Let's talk. Let's get through this pain. If we can. To me, it doesn't matter if it's one person or the next. Just my contact information, email, stuff like that. Just shoot me an email. I'll talk. We'll make things uncomfortable to make people better, and I'm all about it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to honor you for that, because having people around you who are willing to sit and just listen, right, to give you space to just let it out, is really powerful. And I know, at least for me personally, having those people in my life has been really instrumental in change. So for you to say, hey, reach out and I'll be that person for you if you don't have somebody, is tremendous, man. I celebrate you for that.
Definitely appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Before you go, can I pray for you? Heavenly Father, I ask that you lift up the person listening to this podcast right now. You see every pain, every scar, every wound. I ask that you let them know that no pain is ever wasted. I ask that you take their test and bring it to testimony. You help them see that they are not broken, that they are very much unbroken, and that they are about to use the pain that they've felt in this season to propel them forward into a much greater version of themselves. Father God, I ask that you lift them up and continue to show them what they are truly made of, that they are worthy of being gifted everything that they could possibly imagine and then some, that you multiply the blessings in their life because they are worth it. Father God, I ask that you continue to highlight them and give them signs that they do have purpose, and that you will continue to show them the way forward, even when it gets difficult, even when it gets this feeling of overwhelm, that you will be right beside them, and that you can always be there to support them no matter what, no matter how alone and how broken they feel, that they will feel your strength carry them forward, even when they feel like they can't do it on their own. You are there to guide them, to support them, to strengthen them, and that you get all the glory. Father God, we ask all these things in your name. Amen. I love you.